اسمعني يا رفيقي الشهيد يلي تركتنا بكير، نفس الغلطة عم نعيد واللي صار رجع يصير. رجعنا نمشي نفس الدرب وعم نفتش عمشيه، كأنه كل سنين الحرب ما تعلمنا منها شي. و30 سنة من الذل بيظهر ما بتكفينا، رجع الحقد فينا حل ورجعوا يلعبوا فينا. والشباب بعدها بتفل وعم نسمع صوت الأنابل، ورجع الكل يسب الكل وانخلط الحابل بالنابل. ومشيت لغة التجريح والبلد ما شفيوا جراحه، قولك رح تاخدنا الريح ما بيكفوا اللي راحوا. سبق وشربنا من الكاس وبكينا على المقابر، ما اشتقنا على خطوط التماس ولا اشتقنا على المعابر. قلن حش يضحكوا على الناس اللي بيحكوا على المنابر. يا ريت فيك تزورن يوم مش عم يسمعوا مني، فيقن انت من النوم ببلد مثل الجنة. قلن يا بشر اوعى ترجعوا لهيك الايد.
War's over. Regardless of points, medals, or wounds, each man in the 101st Airborne would be going home. Each of us would be forever connected by our shared experience, and each would have to rejoin the world as best he could.
I like you guys!
إذا أنا متت برتاح، بس إذا أنتم متوا
تتوفر أعمال ارتجال الجثث من تحت ركام ورفع الأنقاض من ضحية الجنوبية.
بدي لاقي ابني.
We're going to demonstrate how in Arab cinema we see that relationships are severed through looking through the lens of three major films. The first movie we're going to look through the lens of is Omar, filmed in 2013 and is a Palestinian film. The second one is Divine Intervention, also a Palestinian film shot in 2002. And the third one is Where Do We Go Now by Nadine Labaki, shot in 2011. The first film, Omar, by Hani Abu Asad, is the story of three childhood friends caught up in a war that seemingly has no end. They are torn between their individual desires to have a home, a girlfriend, a family, and their devotion to the freedom of Palestine. In such an atmosphere, their best qualities will be used against them, and their love for one another makes them vulnerable to betrayal, as will be seen in love relationships and friendships. From scene 1, the tone is set on how separation is impacting everyday lives and relationships in Palestine. The separation wall is not just a hated structure in the Palestinian landscape, it is within the hearts and minds of the characters. The wall will be used again and again in Omar, first to show Omar's training as a revolutionary. This is what I mean by that is once he gets out of practice, it becomes a huge struggle to make it up the wall, for example, and also to symbolize the way that the wall separates Palestinian not only just from Israelis but also from one another. The wall makes things such as love, loyalty, connection, and intimacy impossible. We'll see this when Omar has to climb the wall every single day in order to see his love Najda. Ahmad is a baker who enjoys spending time with his best friends Tariq and Amjad. Early in the film, we see these three friends letting off steam together, throwing around dirty jokes, and so on. However, they are also working together for an upcoming operation against the Israelis. They do plan to kill one Israeli soldier. Although Amjad is the one who pulls the trigger on their master plan and kills the Israeli soldier, it is Omar is the one that is imprisoned. They capture him and they tell him they will only release him on the condition that Omar will hand them Tariq. Omar is devastated and panicked because now he has no choice but to betray one of his childhood best friends and work for Agent Rami. When Omar returns back to Palestine, he delays in keeping his side of the bargain and he is arrested again by Israeli authorities. During his imprisonment, he makes a second deal with them in order to find out who is betraying the Palestinian militants. Omar later learns that his friend Amjad is the mole. When confronting him, Amjad confesses that Najra is pregnant with his child and that the Israelis had used that to blackmail him into working for them. Following through, Omar forces Amjad to confess to Tariq. During an ensuing struggle between the three men, Tariq is killed when his gun accidentally goes off. With the help of Agent Rami, Omar and Amjad manage to hide their involvement in Tariq's death. With all the lying and betrayal that was done due to Omar's imprisonment that led him to become a double agent and moles and everything like that, we slowly see it becomes impossible to imagine these friends ever finding their way back to such an innocent dynamic that we saw in the first scene. The director is trying to highlight an important concept in this. He's trying to show what is actually lost in such a war. Friendships such as this is the stuff that is sacrificed. The war seeps down into the molecules, the spaces in between language, and takes away something that is much more important: our friendships and our relationships. Omar's main source of happiness before his imprisonment was Najda, the younger sister of Tariq, the leader of their secret little gang. Omar and Najda meet secretly, passing notes to one another when they think no one is looking. They make tentative plans to get married, and they shyly look at each other from across the room. They are even unable to say the words, "the bed can go here," without blushing. They have to keep their relationship a secret because the world they live in is so traditional, and they are both so young. There is a fondness, affection, and teasing humor in their dynamic that is heart-rending and sweet, adolescent and optimistic. And while it is obviously doomed, you don't know from where the doom will come. As Omar's situation becomes more and more dangerous, and as Omar's reputation becomes tarnished, Najda starts to feel for his life. She wonders if it's true what is being whispered in the alleyways of her neighborhood about him being a double spy. As the situation gets worse, Omar suspects that Najda might be having a secret relationship with Amjad. When Amjad confirms it and says that she is even pregnant with his child, Omar's heart is broken and he has no choice but to let her go in his heart. Omar decides to do the honorable thing and make sure Amjad and Najda get married for the sake of the child, to make sure that the child is raised with two parents in marriage. 2 years later, Omar visits Najda and finds he was totally betrayed by Amjad, who was not having an affair with Najda and is now married to her with 2 children. She reveals that she still loves him, and she also discovers that Amjad did not deliver the letter she wrote to him before marriage. This relationship and how it fell apart highlights another piece of evidence that through looking through these types of movies in the lens of how we see major themes in Arabic cinema, we see that relationships get destroyed and there's no real happy ending for these lovebirds when there's war.
The film Divine Intervention by Eliya Sulaiman is an imaginative and daring film that shows the plight of Palestinians in Nazareth. They are people who live in a world that is segregated and the community life has shredded into nothingness and the civility banished. The film is a depiction of the manner in which disagreements between Palestinians and Israelis has affected the lives of people in Palestine. The people in Palestine cannot enjoy their fundamental rights as human beings, which are inclusive of love and relationships. The main characters in the film are Eliya Sulaiman and Manal Kader. The two are lovers, but the Israeli checkpoints separate them. One of the most highlighted checkpoints that separate the two is the Aram checkpoint between East Jerusalem and Ramallah. At this checkpoint, Palestinians are treated by the Israeli soldiers into undignified checks, which are frustrating, especially to Eliya. The clip from the movie here discusses how the Palestinian checkpoints occupied by the Israeli caused a conflict affecting the relationship of the main characters of the movie. The scene starts with the quote, "أنا مجنون عشان بحبك," which means I'm crazy because I love you. In order for Eliya and his lover Manal to surpass the Israeli checkpoints safely, Eliya risks his and Manal's life using a balloon with the face of Yasser Arafat, who is a Palestinian political leader, to distract the soldiers at the checkpoint. The checkpoints thus cause myriad conflicts which inhibits the ability of the two lovers to meet effectively. The relationship of the two main characters is therefore slowed down, almost to the point of getting broken down to the disagreements that have been caused by the Israeli checkpoints. The two can, however, not stay with each other or move around as lovers should. They are forced to meet at the parking of the checkpoint. To a large extent, the film highlights that love is an almost extinct thing in the Palestinian world. There are hundreds of conflicts, countless deaths, loss of loved ones, and even loss of family members. The film can be conclusively a film where dreams are never realized. It sums up the Arabic view of love as one that is distant from the Western view, as we have seen in the clips previously. As per the film, love never comes to be in the Arabic environment due to the traditions and the community feuds that have lived all along.
Where Do We Go Now by Nadine Lebeke tells the story of an isolated Lebanese village inhabited by both Muslims and Christians. The village is surrounded by landmines and only reachable by a small bridge. It's evident from the beginning of the movie that warfare has rendered many widows, lost children, and deaths for the villagers. As civil strife engulfs the country, the women in the village try, by various means and with varying success, to keep their men in the dark, sabotaging the village radio, then destroying the village TV. The females in the movie desperately try to distract their men from awareness on what's happening in the rest of the Lebanon, with full awareness that war might spread to their small village and render more deaths.
ندعوكم إلى اجتماع تشاور بخصوص هالاشياء الفلطامة اللي عم تعملوها. كيفك ربيع؟ مرحبا
However, despite the females' control, the tense relations rise between Christians and Muslims. It tears apart friends, potential lovers, and renders a mother losing a child. The main character in this movie is a Christian widow named Emma, and she ends up falling for a Muslim man in civil war. It broke apart what could have been a passionate relationship between a widowed woman and a Muslim man. This is an example of how religion is closely linked in Arab countries with society, so much so that it's able to dismantle potential love relationships. In contrast with most Western films showing how love conquers all wars, societal and religious beliefs and outbreaks, Arabic cinema most commonly demonstrates the opposite. In another scenario, a mother of the village finds out her son had been killed as a civilian in a shooting between Muslims and Christians. Instead of coming forward with her son's death to the community, she decides to hide his death, as this could intensify the tensions between the villagers. Her decision to hide her mourning from others really puts a light on how adversity makes love nearly impossible.
The last piece of evidence is at the cemetery, where both the beginning and end scene are women going to visit the ones that they've lost in the cemetery. And this really just shows the real impact of war in a society. It shows how our relationships are dismantled and someone is always lost. And these are the real things that are lost in times of war. So, to conclude, Arabic cinema shows us the real effects of war, how everything is broken down. In Omar, we saw that the wall was a symbolic feature of how it separates people from forming friendships and relationships. We saw the broken friendship from childhood break apart, and we saw all the broken hearts as well between Najda and Omar. In Divine Intervention, we saw how the border that separated the two of them prevented the relationship from growing stronger and was one of the biggest factors of how they were not able to have a real relationship in what we consider a real relationship in society. And in the third movie, Where Do We Go Now by Nadine Labaki, we saw that there were a lot of things that happened due to the civil war in Lebanon. We saw the loss of children. We saw breaking apart friendships and community members and everything like that. We saw that the main character was not able to form a love relationship. And that really goes to show us how all these movies show us the opposite of effect of times of war. In contrast to Hollywood movies, we don't see the happy ending that we always see. We see that everything falls apart in Arabic cinema. And this goes to show us how Arabic cinema just really shows a spotlight on the reality of life.
تعرفي بيقولوا إنه الحرب بتقرب الناس من بعض، بس يا ترى إذا خلصت هالحرب رح نبقى مع بعض أنت وأنا؟
عارف ليش أنت هون؟
إيه نعم.
ليه؟
بدي اشتكي على أهلي.
ليه بتشكى على أهلك؟
إنه خلفوني.